Post-war Hungary was a real treat. Under the tender care of mighty's Rákosi, Stalin's best Hungarian disciple, the country became a masterclass in totalitarianism. Rákosi used what he called salami tactics to slice away any opposition, which is a surprisingly culinary term for brutal political purges. The secret police, the VH, were everywhere, ensuring everyone felt appropriately grateful for their glorious socialist future. The economy was centrally planned into oblivion, focusing on heavy industry that Hungary had no resources for. Because nothing says prosperity like building steel mills without iron ore, it was perfect. Then, in 1953, the unthinkable happened. Stalin died. 3 years later, Nikita Khrushchev gave his famous secret speech, telling everyone what they already knew: Stalin was a bit of a monster. This sent a very confusing memo across the Eastern Bloc: be less like the guy we told you to be exactly like. In Hungary, a reformer named Imre Nagy got a brief turn as prime minister before the old guard got nervous and shoved him out. But the toothpaste was out of the tube. Intellectual groups like the Petfi Circle started asking pointed questions in public, a hobby that was previously a speed run to a gulag vacation. On October 23, 1956, students in Budapest decided to go for a walk. A very large, organized walk. They had a list of 16 demands, including quaint ideas like freedom of the press, free elections, and maybe having the Soviet army not permanently garrisoned in their country. In a stroke of genius, they started cutting the communist coat of arms out of the middle of Hungarian flags, creating a powerful symbol with a hole in it. Then the party boss, Ern Gare, went on the radio and called them all fascists. Historically, insulting a massive, angry crowd has always been a fantastic de-escalation tactic. Gare's speech had the intended effect if the intention was to turn a huge protest into a full-blown revolution. One part of the crowd decided to deal with a 25-meter-tall bronze statue of Stalin. Using blowtorches, steel cables, and sheer willpower, they spent hours pulling it down, leaving only his boots on the pedestal. Meanwhile, another group tried to broadcast their demands from the state radio building. The VH guards inside responded by opening fire on unarmed civilians. And that was that. The line had been crossed. The uprising exploded across Budapest and the country. Regular Hungarian soldiers, apparently not fans of shooting their own people, began siding with the revolutionaries, handing out weapons from army depots. Soviet tanks rolled into the city, expecting to tidy things up quickly, but found themselves in a maze of narrow streets against fighters armed with Molotov cocktails. These kids, the Pesti Shruk, or Boys of Pest, turned the city into a tank graveyard. Moscow's plan for a quick show of force was rapidly becoming a very public, very embarrassing street fight they were losing. By October 28th, things got weird. A ceasefire was called. The Soviets even began pulling their tanks out of Budapest. For a moment, it looked like the revolution had actually won. Imre Nagy, back in charge, announced a multi-party government and the end of the secret police. For about 5 days, Hungary was free. Newspapers blossomed, political prisoners were released. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, Britain, France, and Israel decided it was the perfect time to invade Egypt over the Suez Canal. This is what historians call catastrophically bad timing. In the Kremlin, the mood was less celebratory. Khrushchev and his advisors were waffling. Transcripts show they genuinely considered letting Hungary go, worried that a full-scale invasion would destroy the global image of communism. But then, Nagy made a critical error. On November 1st, he announced Hungary was withdrawing from the Warsaw Pact and declaring neutrality. That was a step too far. The fear of a hole in their Iron Curtain was greater than the fear of bad press. The Soviet ambassador in Budapest, a young Yuri Andropov, fed Moscow a steady diet of panic, confirming their worst fears. The decision was made. The Soviet response was not subtle. Operation Whirlwind began at dawn on November 4th. This time, it wasn't a few token units. It was over 1,000 fresh tanks and tens of thousands of troops storming the city from all directions. This was a meticulously planned, full-scale military invasion against a capital city. The resistance was heroic and utterly hopeless. Imre Nagy made a final, heartbreaking broadcast to the world as shells fell on the city before taking refuge in the Yugoslavian embassy. The revolution was being drowned in steel. And the world? It listened, it watched, and it did precisely nothing. Radio Free Europe, funded by the CIA, had spent weeks beaming messages of encouragement, which many Hungarians took as a promise of help. It wasn't. President Eisenhower was not about to start World War III over Budapest. The official U.S. policy was containment, which is a polite way of saying we won't let them expand, but we're absolutely not helping you if you're already on their side of the line. With the West's attention conveniently diverted by the Suez Crisis, the Soviets had a free hand. Moscow needed a new puppet. They found one in Janos Kadr, a man who had actually supported the revolution before having a sudden, career-saving change of heart. The reprisals were swift and vicious. Thousands were executed. Over 200,000 Hungarians fled the country. As for Imre Nagy, the Soviets promised him safe passage from the embassy. He was immediately arrested, put through a secret trial, and executed 2 years later. The message to the rest of the Eastern Bloc was crystal clear. This is the price of stepping out of line. For the next 3 decades, the events of 1956 were officially a fascist counter-revolution. Mentioning it in public was a terrible idea. Janos Kadar established a system later called goulash communism. The deal was simple. The state would provide a slightly better standard of living, a little more food, a few more consumer goods. In exchange, you would never, ever talk about politics or freedom again. It was a long, gray period of national amnesia, punctuated by the lesson that Soviet tanks always have the final say. Just ask the Czechs in 1968. But the memory of those 13 days of freedom never died. It went underground, becoming a core part of modern Hungarian identity. It was the ghost in the machine of the communist state. Then, in 1989, as the whole Soviet system began to buckle, that ghost came back. On June 16th, Imre Nagy was officially reburied as a national hero. Hundreds of thousands of people attended, turning the funeral into a massive, peaceful demonstration against the regime. It was the beginning of the end. The revolution of 1956 lost the battle, but 33 years later, it ultimately won the war. A reminder that history has a very long and very ironic memory. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, nerds!